Chris Popper here in Bangor. I'm joined by Principal Mike Zboray from the Trenton Elementary School and Dr. Marc Gousse from AOS 91. And thank you both for joining me on short notice here. The reason why we're getting together is I read that Mike's principal's newsletter from this past weekend, or I guess actually Sunday night. Mm-hmm. And if Trenton residents, it's the Trenton Timberwolf Pack letter. And in it, you talked about a couple things. Obviously, the preparation for return to school, hopefully 5 days a week starting on September 28th, putting up tents and preparing trails for outdoor learning on Saturday, September 19th. But the one item that really caught my attention was the school budget update. And and I'm going to let you explain it, but in the newsletter, you said, as the district works to identify and provide safe extracurricular activities, the Trenton Elementary School will be unable to move forward during this period of budget uncertainty. At this time, the school needs to focus on providing essential programming only. Right. And Mike, when I asked you that last night, I said, are you basically saying that there's not going to be any extra athletics, club activities? And that's where we are right now.
Yeah. And that is where we are. And I think it's important to put that in context. The school board passed a budget back in March that had, the needs that the school needed to move forward for the next school year. And it was filled with just those essential items. And at that time, after that, COVID happened, and recognizing the fact that there were some tough times coming, the school board came back after that in July and made some further cuts to that budget, up to about $130,000 to try to bring that delta down in terms of what the ask was from the town. And then at that time, towns were struggling to figure out how to pass school budgets, because what happens is if a town does not pass a school budget, we are bound by law to go back to last year's budget. And the difference between last year's budget and this year's budget is about $290,000 in terms of that difference. And so when it comes to thinking about what things you're going to have to pay for, you have to manage that difference. And it's really hard, and it pains me to think of what things outside of essential services that I need not pay for to make sure that I have enough money to pay my teachers and my ed techs and the programming that we have to do for kids. Like I said in that part of the letter, those essential services.
And if I could, Chris, just to add, sure. There is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't have a budget, whatever the budget is. Every single town in the AOS has been able to figure out a way to move forward and have a town meeting, whether that's a drive-in town meeting, whether that's by referendum. It's not for the school department to determine how, but it's inconceivable to me how we're at this point. And simply committing to a tax rate is not a budget. That is still, we still do not have approval from the voters. So committing a rate doesn't mean anything. It's a figure. We've been asked, I believe the question was asked by the selectman through Michael, whether or not we could upload last year's budget to the state. And the answer to that is no. It gets a little deeper than that. Not only are we going to have to start cutting those programs or freezing them, if you will, and it pains us to do so, but we'll also the state's notified us that we're going to have our subsidy impacted because we don't have a budget. I've been doing this for nearly 40 years, and I've never seen a scenario like this unfold, ever, in any of the communities I've worked in. And we've had some pretty tough budget scenarios in other places, and I just don't understand why we're in the place we're in. There are ways to be able to figure out how to move forward, and it isn't about the number, it's about the process. We'll live with the number that the taxpayers approve. We'll work through that. That's not the issue. The issue is the process.
Well,
And to suggest that it stifles the democratic process, Chris, I think you've been at our drive-in town meetings, and I've been at several, and I've seen nothing to even suggest that there's a hindrance of anybody being able to speak publicly or provide commentary.
well, I was at the Bar Harbor town meeting, and matter of fact, we broadcast that on WDEA. We had people in the parking lot and it's socially distanced, and that went off without a hitch. Matter of fact, it was, I think, the fastest town meeting that Bar Harbor had. I know that the issue has been special education money, and with all due disclosures, my wife is a special education teacher in RSU 19, and my son, who has cerebral palsy, has been a special ed, I guess through 501 or whatever, the physical adaptation, has been a beneficiary. But the town of Trenton, because there are residents in it that receive special services, they are mandated to pay for this cost.
Well, so I want to be really clear. Our mandated costs we will continue to provide them. That's never been a question because, again, they're mandated. So those services will not be impacted. What does become impacted are services like extra and co-curricular that are not mandated services for children. After school programming, these are all significant services, but we're not required to provide those. When you bring up the question of special education, I believe Michael did I know Michael did a very nice job really drilling down that if we were to take out the special education costs, and Michael can give you the exact number, we were talking about a budget that would actually be
right.
So what Marc was saying is that if we were to remove the special ed costs that the town has incurred, which is mandated, and that's our job as citizens and residents, is to take care of those in our communities, we would have had a negative 0.3 increase in our budget this year if we were to remove those costs. So that they're a needed but a significant cost to a town, and we get that they are high, and we worked through that process of cutting to find ways where we might be able to save a little bit, and we did do that early on to try to help that process. And as Marc said, we'll live with whatever the town votes for, but in the meantime, I'm bound by last year's budget number.
And obviously, I mean, there are increased costs through negotiated union contracts, health insurance, electricity. I mean, there are costs that just go up, which have to be paid.
Yep. I mean, at this point, I want to be really clear. If people have questions about why we're where we're at, the school committee's done their job. They've passed a budget. Basically, our hands are tied right now. And if people want answers, they really need to go to the select board in terms of the next steps in the process. It's not a school department question. We certainly want to move forward and we want to work collaboratively, but the good weather window is waning if we're going to consider an outside, and we are still limited, even if the issue is a meeting inside, the school's not available. We're still limited by the 50-person limit, number one, and number two, because we're trying to focus on getting our schools open, we are not having any visitors to any of our schools throughout the district.
Okay, so, I mean, you would, yeah, I mean, it's either going to be at a drive-through type meeting or at an airport hangar at the airport, but I mean, even there, you're looking at 100-person limit
Yes.
under the current mass gathering rules.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I don't see any other way around it. And these aren't school department guidelines. They're not select board guidelines. These are state. The state sets those parameters. But as Mike referenced, statutorily, we have to have a budget by 1 July. If we don't have a budget, which we do not, you revert back to your existing budget. That's not a budget, it's a placeholder. And the delta between not just special ed costs, but salary, benefits, and other contractual costs go up. So this is going to continue to accelerate until we have an answer.
So as of right now, I've seen from all the other schools that they're planning parent-teacher meetings for athletics.
Right.
There are none scheduled for Trenton.
No.
Not at the moment, no.
Nor will there be until we know what our budget's going to be. And that's not just athletics, Chris, that's activities. And again, to me, something even more critical is going to be the after-school programming. That's going to significantly place children and families in a real tough situation. But we don't have any choice.
So the traditional Trenton after-school activities, would those be able to continue with the COVID? I mean, when school reopens?
It would look different in terms of probably more around a tutoring model with smaller groups working with teachers. And that's something, we had thought about in the spring, recognizing that when kids return, they're going to be not as far along as they were. And that's, across the country.
Yes.
Schools are trying to deal with how you sort of fill those gaps. So we would work to identify, those students who were at most need, and then figure out how to work with those. So it would be a different model, but those funds would be there to help support that model, to have kids in smaller groups working with teachers after school for a little while to help fill, some of those holes that may have opened up during, the closure in the spring.
And those funds are not there.
Right now, they're not, because of that's part of the pool of money that I would need to hold on to save to make sure that I could pay for those other needs, the mandated needs.
It's frustrating because I'm not a parent of a Trenton student, but as being involved in this and hearing everybody, let them play, let's get all the kids back to school. We need to have the kids in their schools. We need to have the normalcy. Even if all of that were to happen, it couldn't at Trenton because you don't have the funds.
Correct. That's it. And this is not, I want to be really clear. This isn't a ploy. This isn't a tactic. This is a financial reality. It's not a game. This is and this is the last thing anybody I think would want to do. School side or municipal side is have kids be caught in the middle of this, but we don't have any options, Chris.
The other thing too is that not knowing the Trenton rules, though, you just can't instantly sit there and say, well, we're going to hold the town meeting. Today is Monday. We're going to hold the town meeting on Wednesday. I mean, you've got to give notice. You've got to sign the warrant. I mean,
Yep.
it's at least a 2-week process before, if not longer, before the date can be set, I
Again,
believe.
yeah, that's my understanding, Chris, and that's not something the school department sets. We're part of the process, but we don't drive that process. That is run by, or that is facilitated through each individual town.
All right. Well, we're going to put this out there, and obviously, if people don't know that after school programming and the like is not available, they're going to know now. And I thank you both for your time. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, again, if parents have questions, we'll certainly answer any. But if it's a financial question about why, I really think that they really need to reach out to their select board member. The school committee has done their work. We know what our recommended budget is. It's up to the townspeople to vote it up or vote it down. That's the question.
Yeah.
And again, it's not enough to set a tax rate. That's not a budget. Setting a tax rate is just a floating number. What if the townspeople come back and they vote it down and we've overexpended? So that's not a consideration either. And nor is it acceptable to the state of Maine.
Okay, Mike, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity, and I've made myself available to the select board at our meetings through the summer to help and keep them abreast of where we were budgetarily because of the times. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to come up with a time to have a meeting so that this can be resolved as we start to get into taking care of kids here at school.
All right.
As this goes on, Chris, if it continues to go on, this is the beginning. We're going to have to look at other areas to cut. The delta will continue to widen as the year goes on. It's not going to lessen.
Okay. Well, I'm going to reach out to the Trenton office and we'll find out what they have to say and hopefully can.
If you find that there's some information that seems contradictory, Mike and I are happy to come back on, do a joint interview or answer any follow-up if there's anything that needs clarification. And we're happy to bring Nancy Thurlow to the conversation. So I just want to let you know we're open to revisiting things if there are other questions or points to clarify.
All right. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.